Greetings, my internet friends. Welcome to Walking and Talking, the show where I walk and talk. Leading up to this moment of beginning this video, I felt various levels, or I should say I thought rather, in various levels of acceptance and embracing of the ways in which I don't know what I'm doing. With this process, but it's come to my attention that all of those thoughts were actually mistaken types of knowing, as in I had a thought that led me to feel confident about what I was doing, a thought along the lines of it's good to delve into the unknown, and thus this process of continuous talking without a plan or prior knowledge of how it's going to go is a legitimate one, or even is just in the right direction of where I should be going. And then I began talking and starting to express that thought about not knowing what I was doing, expressing it from a place of knowing that I was going to say something like that. And then immediately feeling the wrongness of it. That, it's like a purported non-knowledge, but it's actually just knowledge. But the knowledge was wrong, as in it's always doing the opposite of what it claims to be doing. A feeling as if I'm always doing the opposite of what I'm claiming to be doing. As in, everything that I'm saying is a lie to some extent. And will keep being a lie. But then, but even that, what I just said, is included as a lie. And as I keep searching for the next thing to say, I realize that I keep coming up with thoughts that appear to me like these, like they're coming from pre-formulated expectations about what this was going to be like, and then I feel some kind of dissonance between that expectation and how this seems to be going. But as I ask myself, how is this actually going? I realize I don't have any answer. I don't really know how this is going at the moment, or even really what's going on, or what this is. But I suppose that I was going to describe some sense of increased stillness or something like that. But then I come up with just complete vagueness of what that word means. And I feel kind of so painfully aware of how halting my cadence of speech is, and how difficult it would be to listen to. I am imagining. And then I imagine that the continued self-awareness of the halting nature and difficulty in speaking would be no less difficult for you to listen to, and has a potential of becoming this self-fulfilling difficulty, which compels me to want to try some effort at physically relaxing myself, as in unfurrowing my brows, as repeat listeners will be familiar with, and unhunching my shoulders. Anyhow, this type of difficulty is not at all unfamiliar. It's also just a type of exposure to my own stupidity, or I feel as if all of my laxness and non-rigor are appearing to me. even in a way that I can only just barely begin to reconcile as an acceptable type of experience to be representing to you. As in, for the most part, everything that I think that I'm representing to you right now feels to me irreconcilable. And the only thing that is allowing me to continue is some trust in the process. And I'm imagining that the only thing that would allow you to continue listening is some kind of similar either trust in this process or enough curiosity or holding out for the possibility that the difficulty of listening to this might pay off in some way. Or to go beyond that, perhaps you have some kind of sense or inclination towards spending time in a way that doesn't necessarily pay off. Or at least doesn't necessarily pay off in any of the ways that you or I can currently discern or conceive of. However, it's possible that I may be projecting too much onto you, and your experience of this is very different from mine. But as I think about the possible states that you could be in right now, or your possible ways of relating to this media, and I think about this state that I referred to earlier of being in time without the expectation of it paying off in ways that we are familiar with. this interests me, but also I realize as I talk about this that this is also another strategy towards recuperating this experience, as in some sense everything that I say is hypocritical, as in I'm describing the experience as potentially worthwhile because of its potential non-worthwhileness or non-conventional worthwhileness, or something like saying that this way of spending time might be worthwhile because of its lack of understood value. But this is kind of conferring it another type of value. That we could understand in some terms of like furthering our consciousness, or furthering our expanding our range of acceptable modes of experience, or something like that. As in, it's still just kind of an extension of a logic that you and I mean, I'm just kind of guessing with you that this is something recognizable. I mean, why does one watch any YouTube video or listen to anything? But again, I realize I'm assuming a lot to assume that the reason to willfully experience a piece of media might be to expand one's notion of how time might be acceptably spent. And this is why I'm skeptical of the logic that I'm using to fill this time. That it's also based on, it's also, you know, like I said, an extension of a logic that's assumed, or motives that are assumed to widen experience, or to widen consciousness, or something like that. as if this is still a residue of a way of thinking and experiencing time that apparently I'm trying to escape, but then apparently, like, the urge to escape something here the desire to escape something here is simply reifying that which I'm trying to escape. As in, if there's a type of thinking or mind frame or way of experiencing reality which I'm disparaging right now, which is, I suppose, a state of wanting more out of something. I don't know, or maybe it's just wanting. And then I'm wanting to be free of that. It's really just the same thing. And then I can go another level up and say that I would like to be free of this wanting of not wanting, and say I would like to be free of this desire for freedom, or freedom from anything, including the freedom from wanting to be free from wanting to be free, etc., into an infinite regress or progress, whichever way. But it's still the same. In that there's I mean, there's something akin to desire, or desire taken to a broader and slightly more abstract sense, that we're not yet certain if the desire is simply emotionally rooted or intellectually or conceptually based, or merely embedded in the use of language, or embedded in the meaning of the language. However, we could begin to investigate that, I think, by kind of observing what I would call the emotional part of it, And with that, I mean just the physiological states that may or may not be connected to the meaning behind the words. As in beginning to just to observe the physical sensations, which you know, as I begin to observe them more explicitly, or just focus my attention on them, it seems like it seems like I have an inclination towards relaxing certain bodily tensions again that kind of subconsciously were tightening, you know, tightening my shoulders while my attention is on kind of a linguistic process. And I'm not necessarily saying that your shoulders being tight causes the arrow of time, but maybe something like that. Maybe something a little bit like that. Where in my talking, if I'm constantly finding a problem with the way that I'm talking, well, now it seems like there must be always a problem in talking, or even to say the word talking implies a stretch of time or a process or something that is never completed in the present. It seems that that problem is necessary, and when I say problem, I just mean a state of incompleteness. And when I say state, we could imagine that to be any infinitely thin slice of time, any moment that could be in the past, present, or future. And in any moment, you can't have thought as anything complete. There's only the transience. That thought takes place over time, and there's no moment at which you have it. However, but then, you know, you can do this logical thing where you say, there's no moment at which you have it, then why would an agglomeration of consecutive moments or contiguous moments or continuous moments allow for the existence of thought? But then it's as if that's a problem too, because it's like ostensibly, as everybody is in popular culture is telling us for the past 10 or 20 years, there's only the present moment. The past and the future exist only in our minds. Then ostensibly, at some point there is a present moment, a now, if you will. I suppose that's useful enough as an idea, but what would a now consist of? What would the present consist of? Or simply, we just ask ourselves, what does it consist of right now? What does now consist of right now? I mean, continuing on the previous train of thought, it's as if does a thought exist now, is what I'm asking. Is it possible to comprehend or apprehend any thought now? Does a thought have to consist of some type of sensible information? If it does, if a thought does necessarily consist of sensible information, wouldn't it require there to be more than one component? Or something that's more than singular? As in, even if the thought was just a circle, you know, trying to think of what could be the most singular type of thought. Even a word has multiple components. And it seems as if it must be experienced temporally. I mean, what even is a word? We could consider it through all of the senses, or even the conceptual sense. But if I think of a word orally as something that is spoken and heard, even if I imagine the word, even if I imagine in my, you know, imaginary space, imagine hearing a word, there's a section of time that's not infinitely thin that's required to imagine that, right? The beginning and middle and end, and all the continuous time that connects those. Even if you say it really fast, it takes time. Or I can imagine the word visually. I can imagine in my mind the word written. And not only does it consist of multiple letters in a particular order, in a particular spatial orientation to one another, even each letter is a non-singular point in space, or in my imaginary visual field. That consists of multiple components relating to each other in order to confer any meaning. So it seems like logically I don't know, this is still a question. Like, could we fully comprehend the word the in an instant? But then like what if we throw out the oral sensation of the word the and the visual sensation of the word the, and just think of the meaning of the word the, just its most abstract meaning linguistically. This feels kind of interesting to just try to hold in my mind, if I can, the word the without the sound of it or the sight of it, you know? Try to imagine the, but just try to imagine simply the meaning of it without imagining the like the sensual representation of it, of that meaning. I'm trying to do it. So far I've been unsuccessful. I'm going to try for a second. I'm going to try for another moment here. And I suppose I'll invite you to do this with me. There's really some weird looking poop all over here that looks at kind of as if a large dog ate a lot of edamame. I mean, I suspect that's not exactly the case. Maybe coyotes or something. Anyhow, we're going to be attempting here to conceive of only the abstract meaning of the word "the," without thinking about the sound or the sight of the word. In just a moment, after I take a whiz, or if you want, you can get started while I'm whizzing. I'm doing it. I'm trying. Okay, I've been unsuccessful, I think, in trying to, think of a meaning, like, I can't think of anything that even is like the essence of "the," apart from its sound and its sight, but then also other linguistic constructions. Like I was just, I started to, as I was, trying to hold the abstract meaning of "the" in my little head, and coming up with nothing. And then I started thinking to myself, maybe this is a particularly hard word to do this, because it has a function that's like very abstract. And I'm not a linguist, so I don't know what you would call, how you categorize the word "the," but it seems like it's a modifier, right? Like it, I mean, at least just, I may be using technically the wrong word for it, but it should be modifying another word. But yeah, I mean, trying to like apprehend the meaning of it kind of just led me towards a more complex structure of thought about its function in the syntax of the English language, which kind of makes sense. But of course, it's as if we're just kind of delving into some already very well trodden ground here about intertextuality, or just the interdependence of signs to generate their meaning. As in, the meaning of the is only relational, not a particularly original or groundbreaking thought, of course. But anyhow, this is actually all just a tangent. That was kind of coming off this question, or a number of questions relating to time as experienced. Questions like, does this felt or experienced or apparently experienced, good morning, arrow of time does it have any fundamental reality? Is it somehow illusory? If it's illusory, is it conditional on? Is it conditioned on any other conditions? Is it dependent on any other conditions? Is it potentially good or bad? Could something other than the arrow of time be experienced? Or to what extent is the arrow of time and what we think of as experience intrinsically connected? Could there be experience without an arrow of time, or can the arrow of time be experienced in greater or lesser degrees? Or does its diminishment in experience equate with a diminishment of what we call experience? Is the use of language necessarily reifying the time as experienced? If so, does that indicate a type of deficiency in language? Do notions like deficiency, which contain a value judgment, you know, of things being things that could be better or worse. Well, of course, it's a relative and conditional type of judgment, meaning that there's a context or a purpose for which something such as language could be better or less suited for. Morning. Or is this whole process of talking faulted? Or is this whole process of talking mistaken? Or let's drop the let's drop the context in which there's any kind of value judgment and just say, is this process of talking actively creating the experience of time where it could otherwise not be present? But considering this alternative of an absence of felt time, and also I just want to say that I feel like I'm on shaky ground because I don't even know why it is I'm asking this particular question of is existence possible without time? And maybe there's a separate question of, is there experience possible without time, or an experience of the absence of time? That is ostensibly, I'm just required to be walking and talking, and there's no reason for me to be talking about time other than that there is a temporal component towards the framework that I've placed around this experience for you and for me, that I will keep talking for a measured period of time, which is 4 hours, or until circumstances prevent the continuation, such as the battery dying or something like that, technical failure, or physiological failure. So it could be, in some sense, that this is a description of the experience of 4 hours of time. Occupying the span of 4 hours. But to this question of whether it's possible for there to be experience with a total absence of time, intuitively, I would say no. But I think it's simply that for there to be experience, there has to be a type of irreconcilable incompleteness. And when I say irreconcilable, I just mean that the incompleteness cannot be resolved in any way. So it's I think easy enough to understand that in order for there to be experience, there has to be an experiencer that is in some way separate from that which is experienced. So there has to be this separation. But the experience itself maybe it's like the experience itself is in some sense identical to the state of incompleteness. As in, like, I mean, let's just say that, like, everything that you or I could possibly describe about our experience, which, you know, would all be in terms of representing sensation, like anything that anything that I could say that I see. I mean, let's just encircle like one segment of sensation as an example. Like everything that I could possibly say that I can see is a type of reduction of reality. As in, like, I can say that I see a bush over there, just to, you know, just to pick out even a smaller segment of my sensual information. I can say that I see a bush, but also I know that this term bush is like a reduction of the reality of what I'm sensing, and that what I'm sensing is a reduction of reality, as in, like, on really any terms that I can think of, as in, well, I can't right now see the entirety of the bush. Ostensibly, I could walk around and walk closer and examine every inch of the exterior of the bush. I still wouldn't see the inside of the bush unless I, chopped it up and smashed it into an atomically fine powder. But then at that point, it wouldn't be right to call it a bush anymore. Also, the concept of a bush is a reductive category that it's like this object is not fundamentally a bush, even if I were to like identify the species of the bush. Even that's still a category and a conceptual shorthand that more essentially means that it shares patterns with other organisms that exhibit the same patterns of the shape of the flower and other characteristics and things in the DNA. And you would say that there's enough similarity in the DNA for it to belong to this category that we call a species, and then a genus and a family, and so on and so forth. But these are all our cultural. These are all human imposed concepts. It's like it's not identical to any other bush. Even the concept of being identical to something, inherent in that concept of identicalness, there means there's difference. As in, like, even basing it down to like fundamental abstract concepts. If I say like, this numeral 1 is identical with this other numeral 1. Essentially, I'm saying that there's two numeral 1s, and there's a difference between them, as in one not being the other. But in order for something to be identical with something else, there's got to be two of them. Anyhow, this is another tangent. I was talking about anything that I sense, or sensation itself, being necessarily a reduction of reality, as in it's impossible by definition to experience fully reality. It's even if you like, how would you even imagine experiencing reality fully? It's not knowing everything, because knowledge itself is reduction. Like, even like the knowledge of plants or botany or something. This isn't like a full apprehension of all plants. It's familiarity with categories that reduce the complexity of plants into something that's functional for us. And by functional, I mean that I'm just using botany as an example, is that it's reducing the wild complexity and unknowableness of an aspect of our experience into a type of information that is useful to us, that has to do with recognizing patterns and making predictions that are useful to us. As in, you know, as a simple example, it's like you recognize an edible plant and distinguish it from a poisonous plant, and then that enables you to persist as a conscious being instead of dying. And so, like, certain types of knowledge proceed forward based on their usefulness, while other types of knowledge that are, you know, as a shorthand, we could say to be incorrect, you know, at least theoretically, become obsoleted by the process of knowledge. But even in a deeper sense than just like the field of botany or classification of things, my sensory experience reduces reality in far deeper and more fundamental ways, as even like the experience of green or something, you know? And of course, like, you know, you're probably familiar with this problem that, you know, how do I know that my experience of green is the same as another person's experience of green? What if the qualia of the color spectrum is actually inverted for different people? And there would be really no way for us to know that. But it's even like the sensory, the sensation of green is kind of like further reducible into all these sub aspects of, okay, what shade of green, how much of green, like, is there green in absence of relation to another color? But then also, like, it's like we know that green itself is not some fundamental aspect, but it you know, is something that arises in the way that our sensory mechanisms and our brain decode a type of a certain frequency of electromagnetic radiation. But I think this is maybe beside the point here. This is beside the point in that, like, let's say I'm here experiencing, you know, my visual field, and I immediately know that the contents of this visual field aren't the reality. That you know, it's like every little aspect of it is something that points towards something far more complex. As in, if I take any one of these flowers here in the field that I'm looking at, I could walk up to the flower, you know, just choose one and walk up to it, and the closer that I get, the more information would appear in my sensory field about that flower. And it's that everything that I sense is relating to myself in some way, like necessarily. It's as if everything that I even potentially could sense relates in a potentially functional way to myself. Or at least how I conceive myself, or how I sense myself. Because sensation is itself I could almost say is as descriptive of the self as it is of outside the self. As in, like, you know, it's like I see the ground in front of me, but what is this ground? What is this ground other than something that relates to my body? And, you know, let's just say like the gravity between my body and the ground, or the path. You know, what is the path other than the space that allows my body to pass through, as opposed to running into resistance. But the path is not the same to like a wasp or something. It's like a self with a different size wouldn't recognize this path as such. Or especially a microbe. Or you know, something larger, like if you imagine some sensing being that is the size of a planet, it's like it wouldn't recognize a path like this, and it wouldn't even be sensing the same laws of physics as we apparently sense. For instance, I mean, we know that there are other animals that don't share the same, you know, either don't see in color or see an expanded, hello, good morning, expanded color field. And then we know that the visual spectrum is just a segment of the electromagnetic range that just happens to be the range that travels easily in our atmosphere, and that isn't you know, readily dissipated by our atmosphere. Or is it, am I wrong, and it's the other way around, and that, for instance, the other frequencies of electromagnetic radiation, like X-rays and so on, simply pass through the Earth unobstructed, or pass through the atmosphere unobstructed, and so it's useful for us to not sense them because they're so ubiquitous that they would yield no information, and that the visual spectrum is what yields useful information to us, because it's the distance that it travels has a limit within our atmosphere, and thus we sense things like the proximity of an object. I don't know, something like that. You look it up yourself. But anyhow, it's another tangent, of course. But anyhow, returning to the subject of how sensation and knowledge are reductions of reality that that reduction of reality is necessary for something like experience, and I would even venture to say for what we call reality itself, that the incompleteness of reality is necessary for reality. Just that anything that I can sense, and necessarily I'm speaking to you, because I'm speaking to you and I'm describing my sensation, then necessarily every sensation that I can possibly describe to you is in linguistic terms, and so is conceptually based. I mean, we had the example of, it's like, if I look at any plant, even plant itself is a human concept that isn't necessarily fundamental. It's like, we could imagine that, something like some other animals might have the concept of plant that might be functional for them. But if you imagine different time scales or different scales of size, like something that's much larger than ourselves or much smaller than ourselves, wouldn't and possibly even couldn't have a concept such as plant. For instance, like a single-celled organism would not have the sensory capacity to view that which we would call a plant. I mean, like, or at least, the things that we see at a recognizable scale, like a bush or a tree or an herb, something at a much smaller scale, like a single-celled organism, doesn't have the same sensory capacity. It has different sensory capacities, and maybe it's just, quote unquote, sensing certain chemicals that it chemically reacts with in its environment, and that it doesn't have something like an eye. It's just I mean, it's being kind of consists of a certain equilibrious state, you know, which I would also say that that's what we consist of, that depends on certain factors like maybe temperature and the metabolism of energy through chemical reactions. And when you think of a single-celled organism, it's like, from our perspective, it's relatively easy to think of it in kind of a scientific materialist, even deterministic, if you will, if you want, terms. Where you could relatively easily predict aspects of a single-celled organism's behavior by things in its environment, or you could kind of like from our vantage point, it may be like we could conceive of its quote-unquote interiority. If we can kind of like, and mind you, we can't actually like fully conceive of its interiority, but we can kind of like conceptually, imaginatively extend our own sense of interiority to kind of create in our imagination some idea of the interiority of like a paramecium or whatever it is. You know, using our knowledge of the life functions of a paramecium. I mean, I don't know, maybe it does it maybe I mean, I don't know the cell biology that much, but it's like maybe this organism needs to seek out a certain temperature of water, or a certain amount of light, and to consume or metabolize certain types of matter in order to continue existing in its state. And so if I kind of imagine the physical processes that allow for some single-celled organism to continue existing, then I can imagine its interiority as being composed by kind of like the interior form of those interactions with its environment, just like ours is. Like the way that it's like all the boundaries of our experience, I just mean all the distinctions between things, or the distinctions between states, or what we feel, emotions, you know, hunger, tiredness. It's like these all, I would say, relate to our survival. And not necessarily that it's not necessarily that everything we sense is a life or death matter. Of course not. But the way that we sense, the boundaries of our sensory apparatus, and the ways that we decode the sensory information or have any information at all. It's like information at all, or and I'm expanding this to say like experience at all. Is necessarily related directly or indirectly towards our survival, and this extends even beyond just mere biological survival. But so say for instance if good morning. Say for instance if I'm not interested in procreating or something, or even if I'm not particularly concerned about being long-lived, or maybe if I don't even particularly identify ultimately with my physical body, but even if I identify with, mimetic content or something like that, then it's like my mental processes going on always seem to have like something to do with the proliferation of whatever this mimetic content that I might identify with, trying to communicate it. And communicating it means like, spreading that mimetic content in some form with other beings that could become a carrier for it. And even if it's not exactly the content itself, it's like it's interacting with something else, as in, even if you are hearing this, even if you are understanding in even just the basic linguistic way, even if you understand the syntax of my sentences or sentence fragments, as the case may be, then something that is identified with myself is interacting with something that's identified with yourself. And there's, I would say, some form of continuity taking place. And that whatever this phenomenon is that you and I are identifying as an aspect of this experience is not necessarily limited temporally in the same way that our bodies are. As in, this is also a recording. The recording can be played after I'm dead. But even if it's not, the continuity between my experience and your experience, which is, of course, not total, but I would say that this verbal linguistic content for me is occupying the center of my experience right now, and I would venture to guess, simply by virtue of the fact that you're listening, or I mean, like, even by me, it's like I don't have to ask whether you're understanding this or not. It's like you are understanding this. It's a given, actually. You're understanding what I'm saying. Because if you weren't understanding it, you wouldn't be understanding it. Interestingly, it's as if the conditionality of this aspect of experience is like self-creating, or you know, like this type of statement, like you and I are experiencing this right now. It's very strange. Or even just to say that like there's something that is in a way fundamentally the same about your experience and about my experience. Maybe it's not so much the about, but that quote unquote you have experience, and I quote unquote have experience, or, you know, I'm putting the have in scare quotes, like that there is experience at all, in some sense, that aspect, or I mean, maybe that's really an abstraction, but in that sense, there's no difference, or like there's difference in the quality of experience. There necessarily must be to differentiate you and I, but in the fact of experience, there's no differentiation, but also, for there to be differentiation implies a sameness of substrate. Syndiffeonesis, to use a fancy term, as far as I'm aware, coined by Chris Langan, that difference necessitates sameness, and sameness necessitates difference, as in, if you differentiate between two things, two entities, there's implied a substrate for those two entities which is the same. And that's kind of how I'm describing, like, to differentiate you from me, there's implied a substrate of, you know, like, an experiencing being, or just like in the most abstract sense, experiencer that is the same as a substrate. And then, conversely, sameness implies difference, and that for something to be the same as something else implies that there's more of it. And for there to be more of something, it's necessarily different. Just kind of like I was saying this in different words earlier when I was talking about, for something to be identical with something else, it must be different, and that there's another one of it. These are all just kind of like tautologies that are kind of so obvious that we never think about them. Like you can kind of discern how they're tautological, where like you have something that appears like a piece of information, like this idea of syndiffeonesis, that difference implies sameness and sameness implies difference. And when I think about them, it's like, okay, yeah, this seems like a piece of information. But then when I think about it longer, it's like I realize just how obvious it is that it's like the terms are creating each other, as in like the concept of difference is contained within the concept of sameness, and then the concept of sameness is contained within the concept of difference, and then really it's as if those two cancel each other out, like matter and antimatter. And then it reduces to a non-information. It reduces to a zero. In the way that, like John Wheeler said, the boundary of a boundary is zero. Like all of what we would refer to as reality is like an elaboration of nothing, or like it's like a sophistication of nothing. Like something is just kind of like overly sophisticated nothing. Or it's obfuscated nothing.
Or there's this other option that
and this kind of like relates to what I've kind of been trying for a while to describe about sensation being a reduction of our reality. That it's drawing lines of distinction and thereby creating the content that is between those lines. For me to differentiate edible plant from poisonous plant, or just green from yellow, or even like form versus emptiness, as in like there's like the as I'm perceiving the difference between the ground and the air, that this is functional as it relates to that which constitutes the self that perceives them. It's like we can also know that conceptually the air is not empty, and it took humans some time to come to this idea that air is also substance and not simply emptiness. In the same way that it might take us, it's like taking us some time to come to the idea that even the vacuum of space is a type of substrate and not simply nothingness. But then, as opposed to matter. And then if you keep going in that direction, it kind of becomes apparent just how implicated the type of observer becomes in all of that. Particularly when you get to quantum physics and so on. That, whether something is a wave of probability, potentiality, or whether it's a particle that is matter, or a point, something with discernible location, is observer dependent. Now, like, everything that I'm saying is always going to keep being problematic. And that, like, and you can find the problematicness of everything that I'm saying through any conceptual angle that you want to take it. As in the question that comes up, if all this reality is observer dependent, then what makes the observer? And the observer is actually no different from the observed reality, and that it's also, like, how do I conceive of myself? How do I sense myself? And when I look at that, of course, you come up with nothing other than interrelation and that which it's relating to in order to exist. Is also nothing that has any inherent existence. I mean, you can just like even in the way that I'm describing that which I sense or that which I experience is dependent on language that belies concepts that are about describing an objective reality. I mean, like, it's as if all of the language is made for describing objective reality. And that's what I am necessarily kind of using to describe myself. But even if that's not the case, just waiting for this plane to go by. It's a fighter jet. 2 fighter jets. Like even everything that I can imply is wrong. You know, I'll talk about how my sensory experience, which, you know, it's like I'm kind of for the sake of argument kind of pretending is more fundamental than conceptual knowledge. It's not necessarily the case. As we could see, as maybe I'll get into later.
Oh, you see water.
Even for me to talk about the limitation of my sensory experience, I'm using concepts to describe that which I'm saying is beyond my sensory experience, or at least potentially beyond my sensory experience. And this is a problem because these are concepts that are kind of extrapolations of accumulated sensory experience. As in, like, the concept of a species of a plant is a generalization that comes from, you know, repeated observation of certain patterns in sensory experience. Or the concept of the color green, or the concept that the visible colors are bands on the electromagnetic spectrum, which has an extent beyond that which is clearly visible, but we know about them by mechanically extending our senses with technology. It's like everything that I can even say about anything that might lie beyond my sensory experience is, in a sense, simply an extension, like a extension of sensory experience in my imaginary space. Like we can see how all of this abstract knowledge, even the kind of like, even the syntactical structure of the way that I'm speaking. I mean, if you look at it long enough, you can make the connections between imaginary space and conceptual abstraction and sensory experience, you know, quote unquote direct sensory experience. But also it's like the sensory experience is very much being shaped by concepts. And like, you know, I think there's been, you know, some amount of research where there's some limited amount of like cultural difference between what is sensed, as in a different culture in a different environment, different things are going to be sensed due to their relevance to a different person. You know, just in the basic way that if you're somebody who is interested in plants for whatever reason, you're gonna notice different plants in the way that if you have no interest in plants, you just kind of see the green wall of vegetation. And then like, of course, different animals would have different sensory experiences of the world depending on what's relevant to them, and dependent on the forms of their sensory apparatus. For instance, dogs, you know, would have this whole rich world of olfactory experience. They would smell in so much more depth and dimension than us. What was I getting at? I was kind of getting at how even the idea of the observer is kind of like the same kind of logic, as in I have various forms of conceiving myself that could consist of the physical as having a body. Hello. And a brain. And, you know, like a head. And of course you can throw in this caveat that none of us have ever seen our own heads. We've only seen a reflection of them in the mirror, and we've seen other people's heads, and so we kind of assume that we have a head. And we assume that we have a brain inside of it, which, you know, we've never seen. And then we assume that, you know, from knowledge that we've gotten from society, that the brain is the physical location where the thoughts happen, and that it you know, sensory information comes in from the outside into the brain, and the brain senses it and knows what to do and does something with it. And at some point it like gives that information to us, like whoever that fundamental thing that is the us that observes gets the relevant information. But none of that is experienced. That's all abstract. That's all imagined. That's all in imaginary space. I can only imagine my brain. And I can imagine my brain imagining itself. And of course, none of this answers the quote-unquote hard problem of consciousness. That is that, you know, none of that materialist description accounts for subjectivity. None of that accounts for experience. But I would say that the quote-unquote hard problem of consciousness presupposes a material world and an objective, materialist, physicalist world. And then, based on that assumption, asks, why then would there be experience or subjectivity? But it's the question. The question is deeply flawed. It's has kind of like a mistake that's so big that it's like easy to miss. And that the assumption of a materialist world, it's like the material is something that's created by experience. A materialist objective world is a concept that is an extrapolation from sensory experience. Sensory experience is an artifact of boundaries that are drawn, distinctions that are made, lines that are drawn by the experiencer. But this sounds problematic in that you say, then what accounts for the experiencer? Because intuitively we would say that an experiencer must have some type of existence. And then when we say existence, it's like we kind of intuitively think material. We kind of intuitively think, oh, then there must be a brain, and the brain is matter, and therefore matter must be fundamental. But I think this is a mistake, because if we just kind of like extend our imagination again to the single-celled organism, or to the virus, trying to think of like what's the simplest thing that we can imagine as what we would describe as life, or like having interiority. Like you can think of a virus, and conceptually it's not hard to reduce all the life functions of a virus to chemistry, and from there to physics. And then you can kind of conceptualize the quote-unquote interiority of a virus as, from our vantage point, being this incredibly simplified thing that like would necessitate what appears from our vantage point as a much more simple, less complicated sensory experience, and practically no concepts, no conceptual space, you know, no conceptual interiority or imaginative interiority, as in like the virus is closer to what we would imagine to be the state of inanimate matter that has nothing such as agency. But importantly, it's like there's a gradation there. Like, very clearly, we have a hierarchy of perceived complexity in life forms where it's like, you know, I'm using virus as the example of like the least complex life forms that we can kind of perceive or conceive of, growing in complexity to, you know, bigger single-celled organisms, to multi-celled organisms, to ones with a nervous system, and more complex sensory apparatus like eyes and ears and so forth, and then ones that have brains and, you know, central nervous system and all that, and then to ones that we imagine to be ourselves to have some amount of capacity for abstract thought and representation, and so on and so forth, which is, you know, where we kind of like intuitively locate the highest agency. I mean, what an amazing coincidence that the life forms that we imagine to be the most complex and even necessarily perceive to be the most complex are ourselves. And, you know, to take it further, what a great coincidence that usually the person who seems to know the most, who seems to have the greatest handle on truth, is ourselves, or somebody we relate to very closely. And, you know, the less complex an organism, for the most part, the less guilt we would feel about killing them, you know, ethically. Like a virus, for example, no matter how vegan you are, I doubt that you feel remorse for the lives of the COVID-19 virus or whatever that your immune system is killing within your body. Anyhow, this is another tangent. The point that I was trying to get to, although I keep veering off on tangents, is that the observer is also, you know, created by the same thing that's creating that which is observed. Or the experiencer is created by the same phenomenon or process or separation or what have you that's creating the experienced. That like what's observed and what's observing are co-creating each other. And we can imagine this in a lot of different ways, like you know, trying to simplify the observer to something like a virus in our imagination, and imagining the virus's observed reality. Like, the virus doesn't have eyes or really anything that we would commonly recognize as a sensory organ at all, or a nervous system. It's like the virus is easily reducible to chemistry, as I said. And we can conceive of all its life functions in terms of chemical reactions that just kind of occur through what we would think of as deterministic processes that are inherent to the laws of physics that we observe. So the virus doesn't have any need for a conception of self, and doesn't have any capacity for conception whatsoever. And even its capacity for something like sensation is like the most rudimentary that we can just barely stretch our imaginations towards. It's like on the edge of inanimate. But then, like, when you think about that, is that so much different from like how we would conceive of some kind of like ultimate complex consciousness? It's like, I don't know, if I think of some kind of like, if I try to extend consciousness in some kind of direction that is higher, which is obviously a whole, that whole framing is something that I'm obviously criticizing, then, you know, maybe it's something like enlightenment, like a human person having enlightenment and becoming one with everything. But like, if you look at any description of total enlightenment, isn't this akin to like a cessation and the absence of sensation, dropping off of sensation, absence of distinctions between self and other, and the cessation of time, some experience of the eternal. But wouldn't this be, isn't this like, you know, the same thing as edging into inanimateness? Isn't that like what the virus already is approaching? Like, is the virus like either completely selfless, like the enlightened monk or whatever, or approaching it? And then wouldn't you have to extend that? Wouldn't you then have to go beyond the virus into what we think of as inanimate matter, and like look at a rock, or, you know, just an atom of a rock that to which we attribute no animateness, no interiority, but nonetheless is conceptually continuous with the virus and with all other life forms in the way that we conceive of life as itself. You know, as I'm describing as the virus, like, to me there's no sudden distinction that a virus has that, say, like a molecule that's like an enzyme doesn't have. You know, it's like a virus is almost like just a complicated molecule. And there's not a line where there's not a distinct line between the animate and the inanimate, and there's not a distinct line between having subjectivity and not having subjectivity. There's only the sophistication of it. I mean, also that sophistication I'm saying is illusory and only a concept that's imposed by our particular shape of subjectivity. And now it becomes necessary when I say subjectivity to put that in scare quotes, because it is not inherently differentiated from a non-subjectivity. Just as in supposedly in some state of deep meditation or whatever, there would supposedly be something that you could describe as a cessation of subjectivity, or the absence of distinction between the subjectivity and non-subjectivity, which is the same as the absence of distinction between the self and the other, which is the same as reality becoming indistinguishable from non-reality, or just nothing. And so I'm saying that reality is simply, or not exactly simply, but reality is a incomplete apprehension of nothing or nothingness. However, this doesn't actually like dismiss reality or make it any less real. Because nothing or nothingness or emptiness, or however you would like to say it, is by definition totally unreal. It doesn't exist. It's not compatible with the concept of existence. And to the extent that nothing necessarily cannot exist, then necessarily there's something. But for there to be something, it has to be incomplete. Or as in, let me say it more clearly. There is nothing, which is, that's wrong to say. It's like the actual nothing doesn't work with even the word is, you know, to be. It doesn't have any being. And so if it can't be, then there has to be something. There has to be something. But you can't have something without experience. It's like they're the same. It's like experience. Well, I guess I would say experience, you know, you could put this in you know, loose hippy dippy terms. You know, you are the universe experiencing itself, but more like experience or reality is the manifestation of nothing. Like there's like the duality seems kind of necessary, you know, the duality of self and other, or experiencer and experienced. Are, you know, they're kind of like matter and antimatter, or concepts that together extinguish each other. But in their duality, sort of in a way, like provisionally exist. It's like nothing. If you had like an Acme hole, like in the cartoons, in the Warner Brothers cartoons, where you can buy a hole, and you put the hole on something, and then you can fall through it or reach through it. It's like existence is that hole without anything else. But, you know, one that you can purchase in a box. And you can hold it in your hand. You could stretch it out and tie it in a knot, you know, and observe two ends of the knot. Anyhow, I don't know why I'm like talking like this. it's still like it's as if trying to like resolve something as if like trying to take account for myself. Better go this way. Like I'm here talking, you know, about nothing in particular. So it's just like wanting to in the absence of a particular content that's external. Of course, it's like the nature of the talking becomes the subject, the content, and then but then if you're trying to look at what's fundamental about the talking, then it becomes thinking, and then, you know, the phenomenology of thought. And then the nature of experience. But then I know at the same time also this is all just processing mimetic information that doesn't come from myself, that is cultural. Or just learned. But of course, you know, that seems obvious and not really a problem. Or trying to take account for the phenomenon of agency or something. Like, you know, I start to talk, I feel stupid because what I'm saying sounds stupid to me, or my felt experience of talking without an obvious function exposes me to something that appears like my subjectivity or my relatively unrestricted agency, that feels embarrassing to experience and to reveal, particularly in a public way. And so it's like digging in and wanting to like determine what that agency is, or determine what exactly that subjectivity is. And but in the way that it feels like this gaping maw or this lack at the beginning that manifests as this embarrassment, and not having something to say. It's just kind of continued, as in the absence continues, but it's even an absence of an absence, because also I know that everything being expressed is just as much a very particular and individual viewpoint. And so is actually a type of particular content. And therefore limited, necessarily limited. And then that is further reason for embarrassment. That for instance, my knowledge can never be comprehensive. That it can never actually be saying something profound without coming full circle into the most banal, the most obvious and tautological. But that's all okay, I think. It's not great, but it's okay. I'm in a whole field of fennel. It's as if, in a sense, reality starting to resolve into tautology is comforting to me. As in, makes the idea of death seem inconsequential. I mean, really. It's like consequential insofar as the particularity of all my forms of sensation and conception and forms of experience are concerned, because what comes quote unquote after death is a type of quote unquote experience, if you will, or non-experience that is not compatible with my forms of sensation and my forms of conception and forms of experience, the content of experience, shapes of experience. Anything that's particular cannot safely be guaranteed after death, and you know, everything that makes me would stop or just transform into something unrecognizable. However, it's like by recognizing how the particular, that is, everything that I can be identified with, is necessarily a limitation, or, as I was saying earlier, simply kind of a sophisticated form of nothing. And there's nothing to worry about. I mean, there is, I'm sure that I do worry about dying and don't want to die, and I'm always doing shit to avoid dying, keep eating and so forth, not walking out into fast moving traffic, etc. But, you know, in the general sense, there's nothing to worry about. But, you know, this is, you don't need me to say anything like this. This is all reiterated millions and millions of times in, you know, contemporary Buddhist and New Age and other popular types of thought. Or just, you know, I don't know. Not to disparage any of that. But this is getting lame. What feels lame is like my continued use of conventional conceptual frameworks and linguistic frameworks to kind of like suggest something that is non-conventional or a different or novel or differs from the ordinary lived experience. That's what feels lame. But maybe it's not necessarily lame, or maybe it's lame in the way that everything is necessarily lame, in that like to suggest, in order to suggest anything profound, you're always going to be based in the most banal. or to suggest anything different. You're using the language of the completely familiar. Or to find novelty, you have to look into what's boring. As in, like, this could be poetry, you know. I could be speaking poetry, but instead I'm using normal language, in the normal construction of language. In order to describe, it's very kind of like conditional and limited nature or something like that, and to imply some realm of something like potentiality that is freer or something like that, or to describe the boundaries of let's say our common ways of perceiving and conceiving, in order to suggest the possibility or potential of different forms of perceiving and conceiving. And this is all very lame. Like how I said earlier that this will continue to be hypocritical. But then it has to necessarily be sensible. We can sense this. There's a very sensible aspect. You can understand, at least syntactically, the language. I mean, this is tautological too, that we can only sense what we can sense, and we can't sense what we can't sense. This is simply an exercise in the sensible. Seeing what we can sense. Like at the same time of things resolving into tautologies, I mean, that's just a fancy sounding way of saying that everything that I'm saying is so obvious that it's lame. That it's stupid. This is so stupid. But, I mean, it's also that I think I probably want this to be stupid because it's like what I would perceive as stupid is also like forcing me to stretch my imagination into a different regime of sensing. I mean, it's actually kind of rare that you encounter something like truly stupid. It's actually rare. You know, it's like what we call stupid. What we call stupid is just something that we completely understand. Like you see an advertisement and you're like, that's fucking stupid. Or you hear a politician say something and you're like, that's fucking stupid. But then it's actually not stupid. It just makes way too much sense. The relation, you know, between the subject and the object of that advertisement is all too obvious. The functionality of what the politician is saying is all too obvious. All too fucking familiar. Way too logical, you know? But then not, you know, but then it's limited. It's limited. It's like the types of logic that I don't know, I'm getting personal here. Like the types of logic that would just lead to personal enrichment and like the way that like billionaires are completely obsessed with like life extension, or like finding some way to become immortal, like when they try to like build an android of themselves, you know, they try to upload their brains to a computer, or they, you know, they want to like freeze their brains or freeze their bodies until somebody in the future can thaw them out and bring them back to life. I mean, it's just like, it's like a type of logic that like gets like stuck somewhere and then just like becomes like bloated and inflated. Like there's a river flowing, and then like a beaver makes a dam, and then it swells up into a lake, or I mean, more appropriately, it's like a blood clot. Like it's like, what are you identifying with yourself? And it's like, it's my particular body, and it's my particular thoughts, and it's important that these persist indefinitely into the future, and never terminate or transform into something that is not instantly recognizable as like what I identify with right now, which is incredibly fucking stupid, unless you expect the world to stay the same. It's like, why would you want yourself to stay to remain the same in a world that inevitably changes? And it's like, death is just a change, you know. This is I know it sounds hippy dippy, but it's true. It's like in the sense that when you remove the particular forms of the particular content of consciousness, which is all formed in relation to the particular states of the world that you interact with, when you remove all that, you have something that doesn't have this temporality or specificity, and that is not bound by time, and doesn't have the problem of death. What has the problem of death is the particular, which has a problem of life every day. That, you know, life itself is the problem of changing in order to remain the same. Changing your state in order to maintain the equilibrium that allows you to continue to have a sense of separation from the reality, from the rest of the world. which in itself is a type of disequilibrium, you know? It's like nothing is the real equilibrium, and we're here trying to maintain the disequilibrium of there being something. But it's like the same logic that makes people so fucking anxious about death, I think, is the same logic that makes them so fucking anxious about being rich. Just, you know, the inability, the fucking blocked off identification. Like you're necessarily need to take all this control and power over others, and it is over others. It's like you're not rich unless it's in relation to many more people who are considerably less rich, or, to be more realistic, relatively impoverished. And then you come up with all kinds of very like elaborate and overwrought ideology to justify the state of affairs. I mean, maybe I do this myself. I mean, I have, you know, justifications for why am I not just immediately giving all of my money to people that have less of it until I am equally poor. It's like, why would I ever you know, buy anything for myself that's not absolutely necessary? And then, of course, you know, the excesses of doing something like this. Like this here is something like very excessive. I mean, let's get off of directing my hatred towards rich people. I mean, I do hate them. I do hate rich people. But I can hate rich people anytime. Maybe now's a good opportunity to hate myself a little bit. Like this experience here is kind of like the definition of excess in a way. It's like that's what's attractive about it, is its non-necessity. it's almost like the defining characteristic of this activity is its capacity not to happen. I'd be completely fine without doing this, I think. I mean, I do start going a little crazy and just with guilt that I'm not doing it when I'm not doing it. But you'd be fine, I think, without this. But then, now that you think about it, I don't know, maybe you're like, well, actually, this does something. This is doing something. I don't know, you're still listening. And then for me, it's like, I am actually glad that I'm doing this thing that I don't need to do. Doing the thing that I don't need to do actually does something for me that I need. You know what I mean? It of course involves a great deal of contingency on many levels. Say, for instance, the particular words that I am saying very easily could be very different. I could be saying anything else for it to still have the same effect. The particularity of the words don't matter as such, but also the particularity of the framework of this activity could be otherwise. You know, I could be doing a great many other things for 4 hours, for instance. A great many other things that are equally unnecessary and probably have it function similarly in my life. However, there's something specific to talking like this. Just engaging in a form of communication that seems so ubiquitous, and that is the form of communication that is used to communicate what we think of as the banal and the functional and lowly and mundane vicissitudes of life, necessities of living. Hello, bunny. Like, talking in the ordinary language structure that we realize is embedded in the relative. And hello. Sorry, I was interrupted because I was giving them directions. What was I talking about? I don't even remember. But it doesn't really matter. Oh yeah, something like something about the contingency of what's going on here. And how it's paradoxically does something for me to do something that I kind of very specifically don't need to do. Or how, in some sense, I specifically need to do something that I don't need to do. kind of the same with like recreation, right? Or fun. But then it's not exactly fun, but I find it fun, I think, even though it's difficult. But you know, that's something should have some element of difficulty to be fun, right? Or an experiment in speaking normally, or trying to speak normally without exactly a subject. But also I know there are subjects that are particular to my interests, and it's really not any real measure of like the idea of an objective framework for this is also a very subjective one, always. It's just a matter of kind of where you locate the subjectivity. Like I could determine in a more rigorous way the things that I'm allowed to say or the way that I'm allowed to speak by, you know, putting various restrictions on it. And maybe the element of subjectivity becomes located to a certain extent in those decisions about what restrictions I place. And as it stands, it seems to me that the location of the subjectivity in this case is mainly involved kind of like in quote-unquote real time, but this is also false. This is also not really true. Like there's not actual, you know, subjectivity on display here. It's also as you would probably discern if you've listened to many of these, just repetition of existing thoughts in slightly different forms. Thoughts that may be to a greater or to a lesser extent original. Mostly well, I mean, then this term original is implying a whole certain way of thinking that seems to be the object not to engage in here, apparently. Pardon me. I mean, I think that I feel my train of thought kind of disintegrating into more fragmented chunks that feel relatively unsatisfying to me, that kind of suggest a waning capacity for concentration, a waning amount of continuity, which in a certain sense I'm equating in my mind with like the manifestation of identification, as in like these more fragmentary thoughts that I have. It's like they're appearing to me momentarily to have substance, like something appears to me as being true for a second, something that I say, and then more quickly I realize it to be false or incomplete or limited or stupid in one way or another, and so it kind of quickly becomes invalidated and discarded, or kind of dies in a sense, and then it's whatever the new thought is that was a response to it, that for a moment appears to be, the new truth or the truer truth that is invalidating the old falsehood. And then it just does the same thing. It's like reactivity that occurs in a more fragmentary and faster paced way than some other mode of thinking that I'm now just sort of imagining, a being having more continuity and sort of more transparency. I mean, not perfect, but like to a degree. Hey, lizard. Having relatively more transparency, and as in to some degree slightly less mistaken for truth, or being slightly more apparent as an interpretation or as a relative type of truth, or a contingent or transitory type of truth. As in, it seems as if when my attentional capacities seem to be higher, the types of linguistic thoughts that I'm having retain more of this transparency, or this I retain more of an awareness of the transitoriness and conditionality and relativity of those thoughts. And of course that condition of having a relatively high capacity for attention, and that awareness of that quality of those thoughts is also dependent, is also conditional and dependent on, like, my physiological equilibrium and so forth. Getting tired of, like, not being too tired of the same prolonged activity. But now it seems like I'm... Hello. It seems like I'm talking about the same subject with a decent degree of continuity anyways, so maybe I'm not fully diminished in my attentional capacities. However, I'm remaining kind of in a similar level of like perceived relevance or importance to what I'm doing, as in almost none, other than in the in sort of this way that I was describing earlier, of it being necessary to do things that are not necessary. Or as a type of test to see what type of experience that I'll have when removed from what I would think of as distractions. But I mean, but the making this public is like necessary for that, as in to be relieved from my privacy. Actually, I mean, yeah, it's not like revealing myself. It's being relieved from myself by being in public, by making this expression, by kind of intentionally directing my thoughts this way, and occupying my mind for a period of time in this way is a relief from thinking about myself. In a way. I'm thinking about, I'm questioning if this is cringy or not, and then if this whole thing is cringy or not, and then I'm thinking about what cringy is, or what makes something cringy, and it seems like it's I mean, what makes something subjectively cringy? When you see somebody, what is it? Is it simply when you like see the vulnerable weaknesses of a person coming through something that they appear totally confident in? Like my subjective judgment of cringiness that I observe in another person's expression, does it relate to, is it like isomorphic with their sense of confidence in their expression? And if that is the case, if another person is subjectively cringing at their own expression, does that contribute to their expression being less, or the inverse of cringy when observed from the exterior? And then of course it's all completely relative. And then I'm thinking, like, maybe my mistake is to cringe at another. Maybe my mistake is to perceive cringiness. And the way that I think, like Simone Weil said something to the effect of, like, it's like a mistake and a temptation to perceive evil. Like, when I'm perceiving evil in the world, it's a projection. I mean, of course, I still question this. Because it sure as hell seems like there's some evil. And I certainly wouldn't perceive it as evil for somebody else to perceive evil. Particularly considering my own propensity to perceive evil. And the same would have to go with cringiness. I mean, I think we can kind of equate the two. Like, when I'm thinking of cringiness, I'm just thinking of like aesthetic evil. Or like affective evil. So am I always projecting when I perceive evil? Well, when I perceive other people perceiving evil, sometimes I'm perceiving them as projecting their own evilness. But then, am I making the mistake and projecting my own evil onto them, perceiving them as projecting their own evilness? And then there's this question, like if I were fully kind of like metabolizing and processing that in myself, which is evil, actively, could I be not perceiving evil? Like, is my perception of evil an artifact of ignoring my own agency, or allowing my own agency to deteriorate or fester and decay because of not doing enough. Not pushing against my ethical edge or my ethical horizon. God, shut the fuck up there. Like, put more simply, if I were doing more to help, or if I were actually helping in the best way that I could, or in the deepest sense that I could, that activity would be filling up the space in which I have to perceive evil. You know what I'm saying? Like, not worrying about evil or thinking about evil. Hello. Because you're just too occupied. You're too occupied doing something that kind of negates that question of evil. You know what I'm saying? Or is this false? Is this is this kind of like a moot point? And does it not matter that much whether you perceive evil? And could you help either way? Could you be helpful and perceive evil? Seems like you probably could. But then again, there's this question, aren't people who think that they're helping against an evil just perpetuating evil themselves? Doesn't that seem to be the case when you look at some other people? That in some way think that they're doing good, or at least have some kind of rationale to convince themselves or tell themselves that they're not doing something harmful. And then so wouldn't it, and then also in the same way, is it a mistake to perceive the good? Would it be a mistake to perceive the good and be moving towards it? Because you're always thinking and behaving dualistically. And then aren't you just perpetuating evil if you're thinking about the good and moving towards it and behaving in accordance with an idea of good? Doesn't that seem to be the case historically? Maybe it's easy enough to say that there's some relativity involved in ethics, or that what's ethical is dependent on the situation and the conditions and the time and place, and that it seems that in most cases ethics can be reinterpreted, or an ethical question could have different answers depending on different frameworks. I mean, that's probably some kind of basic answer in there. Like in the way that I nonetheless keep speaking and having thoughts and am, to a greater degree or a lesser degree, aware of the relative nature of those thoughts. Maybe so with ethics. Meaning that they're relative, but that doesn't make them like less real or something, or less important, or like the duality of them is a manifestation of a certain nothing when the good and bad would be conjoined. I don't know. That doesn't make this doesn't mean anything or make any sense. It's just extrapolation. You can tell I'm getting tired. But we're close to the end. But I'm obligated to keep speaking. And I want you to know that I'm only speaking out of obligation at this point. I'm only doing this for you. It's not true. It's that I'm keeping my word. I'm trying to keep my word. To do something stupid for a long time. Like when you get, like when I said earlier, it's like rare that you encounter something that's truly stupid. Like this is that, I think, towards the end. when I'm so tired of talking and so drained of anything to say, but continuing out of obligation, like a filibuster. But I'm not going to read the damn phone book. That's cheating. You got to actually talk. Hello.
Good morning.
Morning. But I'm curious if there are like additional requirements around doing a filibuster in Congress. For instance, what constitutes the continuity of talking, you know? Because naturally in any talking there's short pauses between sentences and between words sometimes, and taking a breath and so on. So if you're doing a filibuster, can you just talk extremely slowly? Like, could I do a filibuster in which I just like leave a 30-second gap between each word? It seems like our congressmen and senators would take advantage of this loophole if it exists. So you'd have to write into law restriction around, you know, the maximum pause between words. And also, like, about other things that constitute speaking, like, does it have to generally conform to proper English syntax? Does it have to be in English? Could you just do kind of like a Dada-esque sound poem where you kind of just repeat the same word over and over again? Like, I don't think it's fair that somebody can read the phone book for a filibuster. That's obviously bullshit. I think they should actually have to say something. They should actually have to talk. I mean, look up, if you search on YouTube, there's like a Bernie Sanders filibuster where he's actually just talking and giving relevant information about like wealth disparity in America. All of it's relevant information that he evidently actually cares about. And he does that for 8 hours or something. I think it's 8 hours straight. And it's incredible. I mean, I'm not here to like glorify Bernie Sanders, but I'm just saying that if you're doing a filibuster, you should have to do something like that. I mean, it doesn't have to be. It could be any type of information, but it should be you actually talking. You shouldn't be able to simply read something. You should actually be stepping up to the context of the situation. I mean, I'm being hypocritical at this very moment, actually, by talking about this, because I'm referring to a different context, and I mean it's tangentially related, but I'm talking about the filibuster actually to kind of evade addressing this situation where I really just don't know what to say. And feel as if I don't have anything to say. But I feel comforted by the end in sight that I'll have completed a 4-hour period of talking. That I can return to privacy relatively. And I'll be relieved of the anxiety of not being productive in this particular way for some period of time. I think. That is, once I stop, I'll be relieved of this nagging thought that I should be walking and talking on YouTube. Like, what the fuck is that, you know? What is that? Just filling up time. Just that's all it is. Is filling up time. I like it that way. And apparently you do too. I mean, well enough to be with me here. I, for one, feel okay about the absence of apparent content, absence of charisma. You know, just kind of in my little like sort of like anti-mediation, anti-spectacle little thoughts, my little anti-spectacle thoughts that I have in my little head. Those little thoughts are happy with this. Spectacle. Alright, I think that's it. Bye.